My name is Sarah Mitchell, and the night my brother humiliated me at our parents' anniversary party, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled. Because while everyone in that room thought I was the family failure, I knew something they didn't. And 3 weeks later, every single one of them would wish they had stayed silent. But before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're watching from, because this story still feels unbelievable, even to me. My parents were celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary. The entire family was there. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, family friends. Nearly 40 people crowded into the banquet hall of a country club outside Dallas. Everyone looked happy, everyone except me. Not because I didn't love my parents, but because family gatherings always meant one thing. My brother, Jason was 2 years older than me. Growing up, he was the golden child, the athlete, the honor student, the future businessman, the son my father bragged about to strangers. And I was Sarah, the quiet daughter who never seemed to impress anyone. At least that's how they saw it. By age 34, Jason had become exactly who everyone expected, a regional vice president at a large financial company. A luxury SUV, a giant house, designer suits, expensive watches, the perfect image. And he loved reminding everyone about it, especially me. That evening, I arrived alone. As soon as I walked inside, I noticed Jason standing near the bar surrounded by relatives, laughing, showing off, talking loudly. The center of attention. When he saw me, a smile spread across his face. The kind of smile that never meant anything good. "There she is," he announced. Several people turned. My stomach tightened. Jason raised his glass. "Sarah finally made it." A few people laughed. I forced a smile. "Good to see you too." He smirked. "Still driving that old Honda?" More laughter. I nodded. "Yep." He shook his head dramatically. "Some people never change." The comments continued throughout dinner, small insults, little jokes, constant reminders that Jason considered himself superior. Normally, I ignored it, but that night felt different, like he was building towards something. And unfortunately, I was right. An hour later, everyone gathered around my parents for speeches. My father spoke first, then my mother. Then Jason stood up. He gave a touching speech about family, success, tradition, hard work. People applauded. Then he looked directly at me and smiled, that smile again. "I think our family is a great example of what happens when people make good decisions." The room laughed politely. Jason continued. "Mom and Dad taught us discipline." He pointed toward himself. I listened. More laughter. Then he pointed toward me. "Some people didn't." My face stayed calm. Inside, my heart was pounding. Jason wasn't finished, not even close. "You know, growing up, Sarah always thought she had some big dream." People shifted uncomfortably. A few relatives looked away, but nobody stopped him. Nobody ever did. Jason took a sip of his drink. "While the rest of us were building careers, she was chasing little projects." Another laugh. Then came the sentence that changed everything. He looked me directly in the eyes and said, "You'll never be successful like me." Silence. For a second, the entire room froze. Then someone chuckled. Then another person laughed, and suddenly half the room was smiling. Even worse, my father didn't say a word. Neither did my mother. They just sat there, watching. My own parents. Jason leaned back confidently, like he had just delivered the joke of the century. The old version of me would have cried. The old version of me would have defended herself. But I wasn't that woman anymore, so I simply smiled. Jason frowned slightly. I think my reaction confused him. He expected tears, embarrassment, anger, not calm. "Nothing to say?" he asked. I looked at him, then at everyone else, and quietly replied, No, the room grew awkward. Jason laughed. That's what I thought. More laughter. I picked up my purse, stood up, and walked toward the exit. My mother finally spoke. Sarah, don't leave. I stopped, turned around, and smiled one last time. Happy anniversary. Then I left. I could feel everyone watching me, probably assuming Jason had won, probably assuming I was humiliated, probably assuming I would go home and cry. They were wrong, completely wrong. Because while my brother was celebrating his victory, he had no idea what was already happening behind the scenes. And he definitely didn't know what was about to happen next. What they didn't know was that I had been hiding something for years. I drove away from the anniversary party without looking back. Not because I wasn't hurt. I was. What Jason said replayed in my head the entire drive home. You'll never be successful like me. The crazy thing. For years, I had listened to comments like that without correcting anyone. Not Jason. Not my parents. Not even relatives who treated me like the family disappointment. Because the truth was something I had stopped trying to explain a long time ago. You see, when I was 21, I dropped out of college. That single decision turned me into the family failure overnight. My father was furious. My mother cried for weeks. Jason told everyone I had ruined my future. What nobody cared about was why I left. I wasn't failing. I wasn't partying. I wasn't lazy. I had started a small online business at first. It was nothing. Just me working from a tiny apartment with a second-hand laptop. I built websites for local businesses, then marketing campaigns, then sales systems, then entire e-commerce operations. For years, I worked 16-hour days, while my friends were going out, while my family mocked me, while Jason climbed the corporate ladder. I was building something. Slowly, quietly, relentlessly. Most people only see success when it becomes impossible to ignore. They never see the years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the fear, the sacrifices. By 26, my company had its first $1 million year. Nobody in my family knew. By 28, I had 20 employees. Nobody knew. By 30, we were working with national brands. Still nobody knew. And by 34, the company was worth over $40 million. 40 million. Yet every holiday, every family dinner, every gathering, Jason still treated me like I was unemployed. At first, I thought it was funny, then sad. Then eventually, I stopped caring. Or at least I thought I did. The next morning after the anniversary party, I sat in my office overlooking downtown Dallas. My assistant walked in. You okay? I smiled. Never better. She raised an eyebrow. Really? No. I laughed. But I will be. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. I ignored it. A minute later she called again, then again, and again. 6 missed calls before noon. I never answered. For the first time in my life, I was done explaining myself, done seeking approval, done participating in a game designed for me to lose. 3 days later, something interesting happened. Jason called. Not to apologize, not to check on me. Not because he felt guilty. He called because he needed something. I almost laughed when I saw his name. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello. His voice sounded unusually friendly. Hey, Sarah. I immediately knew he wanted a favor. What do you need? A pause, then he chuckled. Always straight to business. Exactly. Business. Because Jason only remembered I existed when he wanted something. He explained that he was working on a major investment project. A huge opportunity. A deal that would supposedly change everything. And somehow, he needed an introduction. An introduction to one of the companies my firm happened to work with. I listened quietly, then asked a simple question. Why would they listen to me? Jason laughed. Come on, you know people. Interesting. For years, I was a failure. Now suddenly I knew important people. I smiled. I'm sure you'll figure it out. The friendliness disappeared instantly. What does that mean? It means no silence. Jason sounded shocked. No, that's right. You won't even make an introduction? No, his voice hardened. You still upset about the party? Still upset. As if public humiliation was some harmless joke. As if years of disrespect meant nothing. I leaned back in my chair. No, Jason. Then what's the problem? The problem is that you've spent 15 years treating me like I'm beneath you. Another silence. Then came the arrogance, the same arrogance that had followed him his entire life. You know what your problem is, Sarah? I laughed. No. Tell me. You've always been jealous. Jealous. Of him. The man who measured his worth through job titles and expensive watches. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The conversation ended a few minutes later. Neither of us realized it then, but that phone call would become one of the biggest mistakes Jason ever made, because what he didn't know was that the investment deal he was chasing had already crossed my desk, and there were serious problems. Very serious problems. Problems that would soon destroy everything he thought he had built. A week later, I received a call from one of our analysts, the same project Jason was betting his future on. It was collapsing. Fast. Investors were pulling out. Numbers weren't adding up. Something was very wrong. I considered warning him. For about 5 seconds. Then I remembered the anniversary party. The laughter. The humiliation. The years of disrespect. No, Jason was a grown man. He could live with the consequences of his own decisions. Just like I had. Days passed. Then another week. Then suddenly, everything exploded. The investment deal failed. Publicly. Violently. Millions vanished. People panicked. Careers were suddenly in danger. And Jason had attached his reputation to the entire thing. The golden boy. The family genius. The successful brother. Now facing a disaster nobody saw coming. My phone started ringing nonstop. First my mother. Then my father. Then relatives. Then cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Everyone wanted to talk. Everyone suddenly remembered I existed. But something even bigger was coming. Because during the investigation into the failed deal, people started asking questions about connections, about businesses, about industry relationships, and eventually, someone discovered exactly who owned the company Jason had once mocked. Someone discovered me. And when that truth started spreading through our family, everything changed. 3 weeks later, my brother showed up at my door, and he looked terrified. 3 weeks later, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I barely recognized my brother. Jason looked exhausted. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His confidence was gone. And for the first time in his life, he looked scared. Real fear. The kind of fear that appears when someone realizes the world no longer sees them the way they see themselves. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. Can we talk? I leaned against the doorway. About what? He looked away. That alone was shocking. Jason never looked away. Not from anyone. Not ever. My situation. There it was. Not an apology. Not regret. Not accountability. His situation. I almost laughed. Your situation? He nodded. Can I come inside? No, his jaw tightened. I could see him fighting the urge to become arrogant again. But arrogance wasn't working for him anymore. Not after what had happened. Not after the failed investment. Not after the investigation. Not after everyone started learning the truth. Jason took a deep breath. I need help. Those 3 words nearly stopped time. Because growing up, Jason would rather walk through fire than admit he needed anyone. Especially me. I folded my arms. What kind of help? His voice dropped. There are people asking questions. What kind of questions? He hesitated. The company. My company. The same company he used to mock. The same company he called a joke. The same company he said would never make me successful. Now suddenly it mattered. Now suddenly it was important. Interesting how that works. What about it? I asked. Jason swallowed. They found out who owns it. I smiled. And his face flushed. They know it's you. There it was. The truth. The secret was out. The family had finally learned what I had spent years building. Not because I announced it. Not because I bragged, because reality eventually became too big to hide. My company wasn't a side project. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't love. It was one of the fastest growing private companies in the state. And everyone now knew it. My parents. My relatives. Jason's co-workers. His investors. Everyone. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Jason spoke again. I need you to help me fix this. I laughed. Actually laughed, because after everything, he still didn't understand. You think this is about business? His eyes narrowed. Isn't it? No, I stepped forward. This is about respect. Jason looked uncomfortable. Good. For years, I had been uncomfortable. Now it was his turn. You stood in front of our entire family and told me I'd never be successful like you. He said nothing. You humiliated me. Still nothing. You spent years treating me like I was beneath you. His shoulders dropped, and then something happened I never expected. Jason started crying. Not dramatically. Not theatrically. Quietly. The way people cry when they finally run out of lies. I messed up. I stared at him. Those words sounded strange coming from him, almost foreign. For a moment, I saw my older brother. Not the arrogant executive, not the golden child, just a flawed human being. Then he said something that changed everything. Dad knows. I frowned. Knows what? Jason looked away. He knows you've been helping everyone. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? The medical bills, Mom's surgery, the wedding loan, my cousin's emergency, the mortgage payment, my uncle's house. Everything, every secret act of kindness, every anonymous check, every quiet rescue. They knew. All of it. A week later, my parents called a family meeting. The same relatives who laughed at me at the anniversary party were there, only this time nobody was laughing. The atmosphere felt completely different. Heavy, awkward, uncomfortable. When I walked into the room, conversations stopped. Every eye turned toward me. My father stood first. For most of my life, that man had seemed larger than life. But now, he looked old, tired, defeated. And then he did something nobody expected. He apologized. Immediately. Publicly. Without excuses. Without conditions. Without blaming anyone else. I was wrong. The room fell silent. My father looked directly at me. I judged you. His voice cracked. I measured your worth by the wrong things. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Jason looked shocked. Then my mother began crying. Real crying. The kind that comes from guilt. Not embarrassment. She walked toward me. We failed you. I could hear relatives quietly sniffing, looking away. Ashamed. For years, they had accepted the story that I was the family disappointment. Now they were learning the truth. The truth hurt. Jason stood next. His hands were shaking. I spent my entire life comparing myself to you. I frowned. Comparing himself to me? That made no sense. He was the successful one. The favorite. The golden child. Jason wiped his eyes. No matter what I achieved, you never needed validation. He laughed bitterly. I did. The room became very quiet. You built everything yourself. His voice cracked. I built my identity around people praising me. For the first time, I understood. Jason wasn't confident. He was dependent. Dependent on approval, dependent on status, dependent on admiration. The second people stopped admiring him, everything collapsed, and that realization was punishment enough. I looked around the room. At my parents. At Jason. At relatives. At people who had underestimated me, people who had judged me, people who thought success only looked one way. Then I took a deep breath and made my decision. I forgive you. Several people started crying, but I wasn't finished. I forgive you. The room waited, but things will never be the same. Nobody argued. Nobody protested. Because deep down, they knew I was right. Trust takes years to build, minutes to destroy, and sometimes a lifetime to rebuild. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't going backward either. There would be boundaries, distance, new rules, a healthier relationship, or no relationship at all. For the first time in my life, the choice belonged to me. Ending a year has passed since that anniversary party. My business is bigger than ever. My life is peaceful. My parents and I speak regularly. Jason and I are rebuilding our relationship slowly. Very slowly. And honestly, that's enough, because the greatest victory wasn't proving them wrong. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the success. It wasn't the apology. The greatest victory was finally understanding my worth had never depended on their approval, not when they mocked me, not when they doubted me, not when they laughed, and not even when they finally believed in me. My value never changed, only their ability to see it did. So if you're watching this and someone has convinced you that you'll never be enough, remember this. People can be wrong about you for years, sometimes decades. But their opinion is not your identity, their doubt is not your future, and their limitations do not define your potential. Never let other people's opinions define your worth, because one day, the same people who underestimated you may be forced to face the truth, and when that day comes, make sure you've already learned to believe in yourself.